Welcome to Inside Sim Racing. I'm Darin Ganji, and today I have an exclusive first look at the iRacing driver swap functionality that's going to be coming soon. And before I get into that, I'd like to go over a little bit of history regarding driver swaps in sim racing, where it all started and how far it's come. And then I'll tell you all about what's coming in iRacing. First thing I'd like to say about it is driver swaps in endurance racing takes sim racing to a whole new level. Because what ends up happening is not only are you out to do well yourself, but you have the added pressure of being part of a team and basically getting that car to the pit stop where you're going to do, where that driver swap's going to take place. And then not only that, as a team, you have the pressure to finish that race. And I've participated in endurance races from 4 hours all the way up to 12 hours. Actually, I think I even did a 24-hour one at one point, but I just have to say it is probably the most intense and most fun form of sim racing I've ever participated in. If you didn't know or are new to the sim racing scene, driver swaps have been around for a long time. And dating back all the way to 2003, as far as I know, and as far as the research I've done and just being part of sim racing for so long, this is how I remember it starting. And there was a site called the US Pits that was running an event called the Bull Run 1000. And basically it was taking a fantasy track, Bull Run, and they for years were running it to where you had to do it with two drivers, but basically there was two races being run, and then they would combine the standings, and then they'd come up with, an event winner or team winner. And then in 2003, using NASCAR 2003, the US Pits really pioneered driver swaps. And it was run in NASCAR 2003 with a mod that the US Pits had created called TPTCC. And it had a Corvette and a Ford Mustang that year that we ran. And you basically had to create a team, and each driver on that team would have to name their player the same exact name, so you had the same characters in the name, and then you had to run the same car file. And basically what you do is trick the game, or the sim, in this case NASCAR 2003, into thinking that you disconnected and then reconnected. And when you disconnected, let's say I was doing it, my teammate would then join with all that same information and basically take the car over. So I ran in that first driver swap race that they ran. It was the Bull Run 1000, and it was in November of 2003. And unfortunately, my old friend and teammate at the time, Gilles Moret, and I don't think we got to the driver swap portion because looking at the standings, and I've got them here for you, we didn't fare too well. So I got the bug though with that race. And at the time I had a series called SSCA, which I had been running since the dawn of online sim racing. And I decided I wanted to put on an event because they were only going to do this thing annually. And I got the big time bug to do this driver swap racing. So I decided to hold a 6-hour race at Daytona Road Course using the same setup, NASCAR 2003, Trans Am mod. And for that one, I actually finished. Me and my teammates, Terry Allen and Scott Holmes, finished 7th, 7 laps down, and it was a great feeling just to finish, even though we finished so far behind. We had, our share of issues during that race, which is why we finished so far behind. But we finished more than mid-pack. There was 25 total teams. 16 teams finished the race, so we fared well. And I gotta say that from that moment on, I was hooked. Like I said originally, it takes sim racing to a whole new level. Something I didn't mention too is there was actually somebody came up with basically a batch file or a little app, I guess you could call it in today's standards, where you push Control, Alt, and End on your keyboard, and it would kick you from NASCAR 2003. Otherwise, you had to either pull your connection, figure out a way to crash NASCAR 2003, because you couldn't just leave the server because then you would retire from the race. So you had to basically disconnect and then your teammate would reconnect. So between then and now, there's been a few other ways that you can do endurance racing. rFactor had a method where, and it was built into rFactor, where you could take over the car, and it was really clunky and buggy, and we'd get disconnected a lot of times during those swaps, and rFactor wouldn't allow you to reconnect once you disconnected from a server. So we ran a bunch of races with that. I got some footage of some of our events and had a lot of fun with it, but it was frustrating because a lot of teams would be disconnected when that didn't need to be taking place. And then Live for Speed was another title that had driver swaps, and I think, as far as I know, they're still running endurance races in Live for Speed, but as a lot of you may or may not know, Live for Speed was not developed to its potential, and honestly, there hasn't been any major upgrades to that title since 2008, and they've kind of been left behind as far as the new technology goes, iRacing, Assetto Corsa, rFactor 2, that kind of stuff. And Live for Speed never had any real cars. I mean, they were kind of real, or real tracks, so you just couldn't take it to that true endurance racing level. But now, iRacing has been spending a lot of times, and if you're a fan of the show and you've been watching our show for a long time, you know that we have been bugging Tony Gardner and the guys at iRacing to implement driver swaps into their setup. And that day is finally coming. Over the last couple of weeks, William Marsh is our blogger here at Inside Sim Racing, and we've been able to run some driver swap races with some alpha testers and some iRacing staff members. First couple races we ran were super late model at New Smyrna, and then we ran it was a multi-car, or multi-class, where the Skippy, Spec Racer, and VW Jetta were all available to run, and we ran that race. Actually, William and I did pretty good in that one. We finished second in the Skippy. And then Tony Gardner, iRacing president, asked what we would like to run, and we picked Donington and picked two GT3 cars, so you can run the BMW or the roof Porsche track car, and I believe it was 20 laps, and we had that race just this last week. And I gotta say, iRacing has really gone above and beyond as far as implementing this, and from talking to Tony about it over the years, they've basically had to go through a lot of different parts of the code to make this happen. So now it's going to be available unless there's some issues that crop up, but right now everything seems to be totally functional, and they're still working over some cosmetic things and a variety of things, and that's part of why we're still in testing. But they're on track to have this ready by the next build, which is in October of this year, 2014. So again, I'm really looking forward to it. And so far, so great. This is probably the best implementation of driver swaps I've ever seen. No having to fake the title into thinking you've disconnected. This is all built into iRacing the way it should be. iRacing is going to run official series with it. You're going to be able to do hosted races, and I'm going to talk to you about a special event we're going to have here at the end of this show. So, some features and the way it works. Pretty simple, actually. I mean, if you're familiar with iRacing, you're going to be able to pick up on this easy. Honestly, William and I picked it up really easily because both of us have a lot of experience with iRacing. But the way it goes is you create a team in the user interface, on the web user interface, and whoever creates that team, they paint the car. So then you are both sharing that car that whoever the team owner, whatever the team owner has created. And then you join these driver swap races as a team. And then, so let's say William joins with the team. I then click on join that event, and it asks me which team I want to join. Now, you can set up teams two ways. One, completely privately, so only your teammates can join it, or you can leave your team completely public, so anybody can join it. iRacing is going to have an official series that runs driver swap races, and they're going to have a specific set of rules in place to where there's a minimum amount of drivers required, that those drivers each have to drive a certain percentage of the race to be qualified, or the team could be disqualified. And then in hosted sessions, you're going to be able to set it up any way you want, so you don't have to do this minimum amount of laps and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go over some stuff that was in the info tab while I was in this race at Donington I was just mentioning, that goes over a lot of what happens during a driver swap, and here it is. Team members who have a qualified iRating and/or license level for the session are eligible to drive. Each driver's safety rating is tracked and impacted individually based on incidents, just like any other official session. Each driver is also responsible for their own actions on and off the track. Practice. All of your eligible team members may drive the car during practice. Open qualify. All team members may drive the car during open qualifying. The best valid qualifying lap by any team member will be your team's qualifying time. And both of those can only happen one at a time. You can't have all of your teammates on the track at the same time. Race. Any eligible member of your team may start or grid the car. There is no requirements that any of your team members that drove in the prior session must drive the car during the race. The session requires at least 2 different members of your team to drive the car a sufficient amount during the race. If fewer than this number of different team members drive a sufficient amount, your team will be disqualified when the session finishes. At most, 7 different members of your team will be allowed to drive the car during the race. On the entries page, the DC column will be displayed as X/2, where X counts the number of different members on your team that have driven the car during the race. The DC column on the entries page tracks your team's overall progress towards meeting the session's driver change requirements. The laps column tracks the progress of each of your team's drivers. The DC or laps columns on the entries page will be colored red if your team/driver does not currently meet the driver change requirements. The DC or laps columns will be colored yellow if your team/driver currently meet the driver change requirements. But we project the team/driver will fall below the requirement. The DC or laps columns will be colored green if the team/driver currently meet the driver change requirements, and we also project that they will meet the requirements when the race finishes. This session requires at least 2 different eligible members of your team to drive the car a fair share of your team's laps. Otherwise, your team will be disqualified. A fair share is computed as 25% or 1/4 of an equal share. For example, for a 75-lap race and 3 drivers on the team, the fair share would be 75 laps / 3 drivers / 4 or 1/4 equals 7 laps. Any fractional amount bumps the required laps up to the next whole number, so 6.25 in this case becomes 7. iRating changes are applied to each team just as in a non-team session. Each team's iRating adjustment is then proportionally assigned to how much each driver contributed. For example, if you have 2 drivers where one driver drives 80% and the other driver drives the remaining 20%, then the one driver will receive 80% of the iRating adjustment while the other driver will receive 20% of the iRating adjustment. Okay, so as you can see, they've put a lot into this, and there's going to be a lot of really cool features and things that you can do during a driver swap event, and like I said, I'm really looking forward to it. So some other things really quick, just how a driver swap takes place. Basically, you roll into the pits, stop at your stall, escape out, just like you would, if you were retiring from a race, you escape out, and then your teammate can join. So if you got multiple drivers on a team, and I believe Tony told me that 5 drivers can be logged in at a time watching what's going on. So basically, but I think there's a maximum of 7 or 9 total drivers that can be involved on one team. But basically, the next guy that is going to take over the car can join just like you normally would in an iRacing event. And then he gets in the car. And then there's a time penalty, I guess you could say, for that driver swap to take place. And I think it's either 20 or 30 seconds. So you have to wait 20 or 30 seconds before you can take off. And during that time, pit stop's taking place. So as soon as the driver swap's done, you're ready to roll. Unless you had a lot of damage, then they're going to have to fix the damage. But while you're basically not driving, you can be spotting. And while you're a spotter, you can talk to your driver. And obviously, you're on a team channel right when you go into the race. So you're instantly talking in private, so you're not talking to the whole server. And you can crew chief that car while the other driver is driving. So you can turn off the fuel load, or adjust the fuel load, take tires or don't take tires. You can make adjustments basically like you normally would during a regular iRacing event, but your spotter can do it. And I think you actually have the ability to crew chief now in regular iRacing, but I just thought that was a great tool or aspect of the driver swaps where your spotter can do all that stuff while the other guy's driving. So some other things that Tony told me about in regards to how this is all going to work. Let's say you enter a 24-hour race, and as far as I know, that's going to be the maximum distance. I know that you're going to be able to at least run 24. I don't know if you're going to be able to run 36 or anything like that. Let's say you're running a 24-hour race, and let's say you're part of a team that's in that event, and you had a hosted race that you needed to run, or you were running in a specific series that the strength of field race was going off during that 24-hour period. You can leave the race, the team event, go run whatever you were going to run, and then go back and join your team later if you need to. So I thought that was a really cool feature as well that was added in. So I'm going to wrap things up here. And earlier I mentioned a special event. Talking to Tony on the phone the other day, if you're familiar with some of the special events we've done, 120 Minutes of Thunder, we did a March on Michigan race. We did those 2 years in a row in 2012 and 2013, but this year we haven't done anything, and we've had a lot of people asking, when's the next special event? When are you guys going to run? Well, I've kind of been waiting for the driver swaps to be implemented, and I talked to Tony, and in conjunction with iRacing, Inside Sim Racing is going to be putting on the very first special event that's going to be a driver swap / endurance race, and we plan on running it in November. And not sure exactly what we're going to run yet. Personally, what I would like to run is at the Daytona Road Course, 2 different classes. So we'll have a prototype class and a GT class, and that's what I'd like to run. But I want to hear from you guys, and I'm actually going to start a poll in our forums, and I'm going to put a link here in the description. So join us in our forums and chime in on that poll. Give me your opinion here in the comments here on YouTube. But I'd like to hear what you would like us to run. Probably going to be a 12-hour race. That's what I'm going for. And this is not going to be the only, this is going to be an iRacing official event, but this is not going to be the only official driver swap events that are going on. I mean, this is going to be the first long distance special event, but iRacing is going to have series where you can run driver swaps. So that's going to be part of this whole driver swap functionality right when they implement it. And again, hopefully that's going to be in this next build in October. But we're going to give them a little time just in case any, once things go public, sometimes, bugs will crop up. They have been load testing this whole setup, so they're hoping nothing arises. But so we're going to run the event in November, probably mid-November, to stay away from the end of November holidays that take place here in the States, Thanksgiving. But again, my choice, I'm thinking Daytona Road Course with the HPD as the top class prototype, and then one of the GT3 cars that are available. I was thinking even maybe 3 classes, but kind of like to have as big of fields in those 2 classes as possible, because I just think that makes for better racing. It's kind of a bummer when you join a class and there's only 3 other cars that you're competing against. And sure, you're racing against all these cars on the track, but I just think it takes away from the fun a little bit. So I want to hear what you guys think. Chime in. I don't want them to be race cars. I don't want to be running the Miata and the Spec Racer. I want some serious race cars on the track, trying to mimic the 24 hours of Daytona cut in half, or the 12 hours of Sebring, something like that. So let me hear what you guys think, and we can run anything. I would like to see a lot of participation. Prizes, I'm going to get sponsors on board. I know Thrustmaster is going to be a sponsor. Going to talk to some of our other affiliates or sponsors and see if they want to get on board, but it's going to be a special event. And hey, if any of you broadcasters out there, you broadcast crews, want to volunteer and broadcast this special event for us, we'd really appreciate it. So anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Hopefully you've enjoyed this piece on little bit of history of driver swaps, and this first look at iRacing's version of driver swaps. Come to our website, isrtv.com. Have a link right here and you can join us in our forums. Would love to hear what you think about this new driver swap setup. And like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us here on YouTube, and give us a thumbs up. We'd really appreciate it on this video. Gonna see you guys soon, hopefully in a driver swap race. We'd love for you to join us, and we'll have signups coming up soon for that. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.